Booker, are you afraid of God?
No, but I'm afraid of you.
The premise of a new blockbuster video game, BioShock Infinite, might sound conventional. You play a character named Booker DeWitt, and to pay your debts, you have to rescue a woman named Elizabeth, trapped in a tower in the floating city of Columbia.
Is anyone here? Hello?
But it doesn't take long before players realize that this is not your average rescue the princess type of game. The scene is America in 1912, and a prophet-like man named Comstock runs the city of Columbia as a breakaway republic. Critics are praising the game's heady themes like American exceptionalism, religion, racism, xenophobia, science run wild, and the conflict between haves and have-nots. Ken Levine is the creative director and co-founder of Irrational Games, the company behind BioShock Infinite. And he joins me from Boston. Hello, Ken.
How are you, Brent?
I'm doing great. Good to talk to you. I've been seeing television commercials for BioShock Infinite, and I have to say, I see a lot of game commercials, and they all look like trailers for movies that I would never want to see. But that's not the case with BioShock Infinite. There's something that instantly comes out about the story when you see these commercials. What do you think that is?
I think we pay a lot of attention to the world as a storytelling device, and trying to take this interesting merger of history, of real history and real architecture and real fashion and real politics and real social issues, and merge it with these fantastical elements. Obviously, it's 1912, but it's a floating city in 1912. So that's that contrast of all those realistic elements and those fantastical elements, I think, immediately draws some attention.
So the game is set in 1912. The city Columbia floats above the clouds. Why did you want to make a game in that setting?
You know, if you think about American history, most people think of there's a Civil War, and then there's World War I, then there's a Depression, then there's World War II, and so on and so on. And this was actually an incredibly transformational period of history. If you look at what was going on with America, it was really becoming a global power for the first time.
Right.
We got involved in the Spanish-American War and started fighting the Spanish, and we got control of Cuba and the Philippines, and we also became the technology of the time was just so rapidly transforming people's perception of the world, whether that was, all of a sudden electricity in your home or cars on the street or airplanes or movies or, into this field of science. Einstein is saying, well, guess what? Your perception of the universe, your Newtonian perception of the universe, that's entirely all mostly incorrect.
But in this world, in the world of Columbia, you put the heroes between two rival forces. There's one force is represented by a man called Comstock and a group called Vox Populi. What is Comstock about? What does he stand for?
He views himself as a prophet, as a religious prophet, and he has a mission to lead his people in an exodus to a place where they could, live their lives as they see fit, because he believes that America has sort of lost its way. He calls it the Sodom below.
And what forces are represented by Vox Populi, the other sort of opposing force?
They're the group of the have-nots, and they've had enough. They've had enough of being on the lower end of society. They've had enough of getting the short end of the stick. And they're led by a woman named Daisy Fitzroy into an uprising against the powers that be. And Booker and Elizabeth, the main characters in the game, get caught in the middle of this struggle.
So clearly, although you've set this world 101 years in the past, there are resonances in what's happening right now in the social fabric. But what do you think of these comparisons that people make of Comstock's Columbia to, say, the ideals of the Tea Party movement? And where do you see the intersection there?
BioShock Infinite is not about America. It's about a one man's particular perverted vision of America that goes to such an extreme, a religious, a racial bias extreme, a classist extreme, that it becomes a dystopic place. And even though it looks beautiful, and when you arrive there, it seems almost like heaven. There are very dark things happening underneath. And I think, look, the reason people feel it's reflective of modern times is because there are movements that have some resonance. They're not identical, but there is a nationalist element in the Tea Party. There is a somewhat, in some aspects of the Tea Party, a xenophobic element.
Do you agree then with, I see this in the press a lot, and people writing about your game, they can't resist making the comparison. Do you agree with those comparisons of the forces you created with the ones that exist in our contemporary society?
My viewpoint is that whatever people take away from the game is a valid interpretation to them. It's a piece of art, and I don't ship with the game. There's not a copy of me with the game that tells them what it means.
Right.
It really is just tearing up the internet right now in terms of people debating about it, and because we sort of leave a lot of things open to our interpretation, and I think that's one of the reasons it's become so popular, because we trust our audience to have a role in understanding what we're doing.
Let's talk about that experience of being dropped into this moral universe, because you are dropping people into a game where there are defined forces at work. And what effect are you trying to have on the player?
Our goal with this game has always been do what games uniquely do. And what games uniquely do is it allows players to participate in the narrative rather than observe the narrative. That's the only games can do that. And so I've never been a fan of what we call cutscenes in games, which are those, you play the game and then all of a sudden there's essentially a movie that progresses the plot that's non-interactive. We don't do that in our games. We keep you interactive all the time. We keep you in the world. We keep you, so when the story happens, it's not, we don't say to the player, sit back and watch a story. We say, well, there's story happening all the time. And I think that's very immersive for players, and it's kind of, it can be surprising because things that happen, like there's a scene early on, which is quite a scene that involves racial bias. It's quite dark. But the player is a participant and has to make a choice about how he approaches that scene.
Is this the scene with the baseball? Can we define
Yes.
that a little bit? This is a moment in the game where your character playing the game is offered a chance to throw a baseball at an interracial couple.
Yes, and it's in a very sort of carnival setting, a very celebratory setting, and it's essentially a stoning. And then you have a choice of whether you throw the ball at the interracial couple who's sort of tied up helplessly there in this awful way, or at the announcer. What's interesting there is the reactions we see that you wouldn't see in a movie, because people, they can't escape from that moment. They can't escape from what that world is. And I think it's shocking to people, but it's also the thing that says, okay, you're in an experience now that you can't really have in any other media.
Racism is a dominant theme, it seems, in BioShock, because it is not only this interracial couple, but there are also, you can observe slurs against other blacks and Irish and Chinese and Indians. It all comes up at different points. Why did you feel that was important to explore?
Well, one thing I want to be clear is that the politics and the racial themes, as people discover as you get to the end of the game, they're threads in the tapestry, but they're not the tapestry. I think I wanted to include them not because I wanted to make a game about racism. We just start writing a story, and that story takes us to certain places. And this character, Comstock, took us to certain places. The time period took us to certain places. I remember seeing a postcard, a series of postcards actually, from lynchings around this time period. And they were sort of celebratory settings. You had people bringing their picnic baskets and posing by the body, and they would send these postcards to their friends. It's certainly the racial issues are not presented in a positive light in this game, but it did reflect the period. But
people could be critical of you for indulging in a dark period of history in the creation of an entertainment. What's your response to that?
Oh, I think that's a major component of every artist's toolbox is the light and the dark. And I think you can't flinch from that stuff. Just because it's a video game, why should we flinch? It's as valid a form of media as any other. And I don't see a reason why any theme should be off limits to games in the same way I don't think a theme should be off limit to books or movies.
Not off limits, but there are burdens attached to what the creator, there are responsibilities attached to what the creator brings to it. And I'm thinking about a story that I heard you tell, that earlier in the development process, one of your designers wrote a resignation letter because of the way that religion was portrayed in a moment of the game. What did that mean to you? What's that about?
What that meant to me was, I'm not a religious person, and to me, it presented an interesting opportunity to get in the head of somebody who was different from me. And for me as a writer, very selfishly, it said, okay, well, my main antagonist is an extremely religious individual. This is going to help me write this guy. I'm going to understand it. I'm not, in no way am I comparing this employee to Comstock, who's not a very nice guy. Mm-hmm. But certainly having that notion of faith and understanding faith, I saw an opportunity there. And so when I talked to him, I turned the conversation to him and trying to get a deeper understanding of him and his view of the world and what faith meant to him. And that really helped me write a better character and a stronger character and a more interesting character, not a nicer character necessarily.
But more nuanced, maybe?
More nuanced. And I was able also to bring another character in the game who I was was a blank to me, his wife, and explain why she was so attracted to him, what drew her to him. And that notion was forgiveness. And that's such an important part I found out of, when talking to him, of his faith, that that it's the center of the faith. Forgiveness is the center of Christianity. And I understood who wouldn't want forgiveness for things they've done. And I've never had that sort of ecstatic religious experience. But boy, I understood the desire for forgiveness.
Do you think a Tea Partier could play this game and come out and decide to march with Occupy, or vice versa?
Oh, that's never been, look, my goal, and it's funny, like I read like Glenn Beck's website, if you're familiar, if your
Sure.
audience is familiar with him. And he's not a moderate. And his website wrote a review of the game. Or I've been interacting with the writer of the review because I think he understood this was a game not about criticizing a particular political structure, but part of the game, again, a thread in the fabric of the game is talking about the extremes of where politics can go and the extremes of rigidity in thought structures, that you think that if you think you have all the answers and you stop asking questions of what can happen and the dangers that can come out of that.
Was creating BioShock Infinite more difficult than you expected it to be?
You know what they say about childbirth, that you forget, that women forget how painful it is and they never do it again? I think making games can be like that. You kind of have to forget how painful it is. I think this was a particularly difficult game to make. And I think the reason is because the things we were doing, specifically creating the storyline, creating this character, this woman you're with, Elizabeth, who really is, I think, I view as a step forward in sort of, an artificial character that you can interact with, a partner for you in this world. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a real template for that. And so, when you don't have a map, you run into a lot of dead ends.
What makes Elizabeth so complicated? Why was that a challenge?
Elizabeth has to react in a believable way to what the player does. So she essentially has to act like a human reacting to another human. And the player is unpredictable. We never know what they're going to do. So, not only does she have to have this narrative role and figure out how we get these sort of dialogues across and these scenes across without breaking to a non-interactive sequence. What if you're just standing around? What does Elizabeth do? What do people do when they stand around? And we spent so much time, the team spent so much time on observing people and what do people do when they sit down? What do people do when they're bored? What do people do when they're tired? And what do they do when they're scared? And just observing actual people and getting these tiny details down, because she doesn't have any human instincts. If you put an actress in a room and you say, "Here, just hang out in this room," they just have instincts, to do that. They know how to pretend to be, to be bored, or how to walk to something, how to touch a table and see if there's dust on it. Elizabeth has none of those things. We had to build all of that.
So now you've managed to create a secondary character who is completely interactive and who responds in real time to decisions made by the player. And do you foresee a time when a gigantic cast of such characters could be added to a game? I mean, is that the future of gaming?
Look, I think if you look at the future of gaming, the goal is being in a world where there are characters that you believe in around you. People want stories. People want characters. People want to watch people go through changes and transformations. And I think Elizabeth is a step along that path. She's not the end of the story. She's a chapter in it.
Ken Levine, it was great to meet you. Thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
This is Day 6. Day 6. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We're at CBC Day 6.